I remember this one time JR kissed me in a shopping mall. I didn't think he would, and I said to him, if you loved me, you would kiss me right now. And he did. Was he the love of my life? This is how we met. I was with someone I was seeing. I'd arrived in Brazil, and it was just so good to not be in Barbados because of the freedom. I was at the supermarket, saw some guys with plucked eyebrows, went up to them, and I was like, where's the party tonight? This was maybe 2 days after I arrived in Brasilia. And they said, come with us. And I went to their place. They got ready. One was actually a drag performer at this club called the garaging. And I went with them and I met this guy. He was from Bahia and didn't mind that I had dreadlocks. I ended up on stage that night actually. I don't want to stray too much from the topic, but at that time I spoke no Portuguese. And I remember they had that baking pan for the pineapple upside down cake, you know, the one with the thing in the middle. And I won that because I just answered a couple of questions and I couldn't understand why they were giving me this thing. And she took it from me and pretended to do fellatio on it. The crowd loved it though. And he then sent someone to speak to me, which is something that I don't really like. I think you gotta be brave enough to do it yourself. And I didn't want to be with anyone. I just wanted to have fun because I'd come from Barbados and there are no safe spaces and it's so repressed. And I just want to have fun. But it was difficult for me to say no, and I ended up in a relationship with him. And at this bar in the park, the city park, Parque da Cidade, I lived really close to this park, and we were at this bar called Barulho. And JR came up to the table. I think he heard me speaking English. Anyway, he came over super confident. I was very attracted to him immediately. He's a handsome guy. His English is amazing. He went to a British school in Peru, and he had it, man. He had my attention. And of course my guy was really jealous, and we maybe fought over that because I wasn't as into him. I really wasn't. I felt like I didn't even want to be in a relationship. But and then we were having issues because of communication. He was one of these people who will tell you that nothing's wrong when obviously something's wrong. And when people do that to me, I take them at their word. And so then it makes the situation worse because they expect you to be telepathic. And yeah, horrible. Anyway, JR was also seeing someone at the time. But this guy used to treat him like shit. And so I didn't really respect that at all. I didn't care that he was in a relationship because of this. At least this is how I justified it to myself. Because he would like insult him in front of people, and once he told him that my Portuguese was better than his, which is obviously not true. I mean, he's a Spanish speaker. His Portuguese was amazing. His English was amazing. Anyway, that turned into the affair, which was, I do not remember the first time it happened, but we ended up being together. And but he was a player. He wasn't only with me, he was with other people. And but somebody who gave you attention, man. When you were with him, you felt like you were the only person in the world. Like, he focused on you. He would do things like leave messages for me if I was upset with him. You know, I'd blank him and I'd come home to messages, you know, where are you? I miss you. That sort of love bombing bullshit that I'm now aware of that I wasn't back then. Traveling together. JR traveled to look for work and I joined him. We traveled to Curitiba, Florianopolis. I remember spending days in a hotel room in Curitiba because it was cold at the time and it was great weather for cuddling. with the curtains drawn and ordering room service. And I remember him standing up for me when I wasn't allowed in a club in Florianopolis, and they didn't say why. I had dreadlocks at the time, and I used to get stopped by the police all the time because of my dreadlocks. And we traveled. I remember being on the bus with him and him falling asleep and putting his head on my shoulder, and people in the bus looking at us real nasty. But he didn't care. I think it may have been a bit of that not being from there sort of feeling, but maybe not, because by then he was well integrated into Brazilian society. I enjoyed so much being with him though and traveling around. Once we went to, I think it was a satellite city, Recanto das Emas, and that's when I told him in a shopping mall, if you loved me, you would kiss me. And I didn't expect him to, and he did in front of everyone. And people were a bit surprised because, well, at that time, you didn't really see public displays of affection between men. Nowadays, it's probably more common in Brazil. The midnight phone booth. When he first started to travel, I would call him on this phone booth that was a few minutes away from where I rented a room. At midnight, we discovered it stopped charging. And so no credits would leave my card from midnight. And so we would meet then for weeks at midnight. At me at this phone booth, him at another phone booth, but for some reason it just stopped charging us and at midnight. And that's one romantic thing, and I'm not much for romance, but that's something that makes me feel all tingly in my giblets. Same apartment buildings, different apartments. Because I liked my freedom, I thought it best that we live in the same apartment building but in separate apartments, so that when I'd had enough of him, I could just be in my own space, and vice versa. Polyamory. Jer was extremely sexual. At that point in time, I was having the most sex that I've ever had in my life. And I was also thinking a lot about how sex can be separated from love. And as a result, I thought it would be a good idea for him to have sex with other people. to help fill this need he had, this desire for sex that I didn't have. My sex drive wasn't as intense as his. And that led to threesomes. And I was also very much into Anne Rice at the time, the Vampire Chronicles. And so it was very vampire-esque to go out. We would go to Cat's Bar, for example. I remember we met a medical student there. He was wearing a camouflage jacket, and we had fun seducing people. I think I invited him over to the table, and they'd either be more attracted to JR or me, right? And we took him to the motel. The motel was the place to go. Sometimes we'd sneak guys in the trunk of the car. But yeah, this guy was so into JR that upon penetration, he ejaculated. Yeah, amazing. Amazingly hot. JR was very good at seduction as well. So I was a fetish, dreadlocks. So there were guys who were very much into me, but we had our rules. We knew that if there wasn't an equal treatment going on, that it had to end. And all I had to do was to look at JR and he would know, okay, this isn't working. So there were many people. Another really interesting one was we were driving along and saw